Hello and welcome to iOS development for Android developers. This is Abdullah Obeid. In this course, I will teach you how to become an iOS developer using Android developer terminology, how you actually can relate and transfer the knowledge that you've learned in Android development and apply it to iOS development. The tools that we are going to use is Xcode IDE. It should come installed by default in your Mac machine. And well, I am assuming that you have Mac OS. Well, other than that, why would you want to do iOS development? So basically, the first tool that we're going to use is Xcode. Now, I'm using version 7.2.1 right here, and the version of Swift that I'm using is 2.2, and the iOS version is 9.0. So first of all, let's go ahead and start Xcode and create a new Xcode project. The way that this course is separated, it's going to be separated into 3 chapters. The first chapter, I will teach you about programming in Swift, the Swift programming language, and how you can transfer knowledge between it and Java programming language. The basics that you need to know just to get up and running with the language. The second chapter, we will dive deep into the what is called UI kit and the iOS and the Cocoa Touch framework. Cocoa Touch framework is the UI framework that is used for iOS development. So we will dive into that at chapter 2. Chapter 3, we will see how we can involve what is called Cocoa Pods, which is a dependency manager for Swift and Objective-C projects, which is very relatable to Android's Gradle system, which CocoaPods can be used to include third-party libraries, or what's called pods, that other people have written to streamline the process of networking, concurrency, image manipulation. There's a lot of pods that does different things. So that will be chapter 3. And at the end of each chapter, we will create a project, and that project will be more or less a compendium of everything that you have learned in the previous videos. So exciting stuff. So at the beginning, I won't touch Cocoa Touch framework. At the beginning, I won't actually play around with the UI elements for iOS. I will try to focus mainly on the Swift programming language. So after you click on New Project, go ahead and go to OS X, Application, Command Line Tool, and click Next. I'm going to go ahead and name this Hello World. Make sure that you highlight Swift programming language, and just save it anywhere. I will save it on my desktop. Perfect. So after you have opened the project is going to load, and afterwards you can click on main.swift, which is a file that gets generated automatically. Afterwards, you can see that the file has already created a simple, very simple Hello World program for us. So I'm just going to go ahead and run it right now, product, and run, or you can use the shortcut Command R. Now, after you have ran it, you're going to see this little dialog, this little side window in here. It's basically what's called the debug window, and you can toggle it off, on and off, right here. Right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and explain what's happening in here. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. So we have some comments in here. Swift uses C-style comments with forward slashes. Also, you can include some comments using a block comment. So you can include multiple lines. And we have import in here to import libraries. So the import keyword. So the first library that Swift has imported for us by default, it's called the Foundation library. And it's imported because it has some foundational methods that you can use in your code, something like string manipulation, something like print statements, and some other basic things that we will dive into in the next following chapters. For now, you can just go ahead and leave it. And then we have the method call in here, which is a print statement. Sorry, it's a print function. Now this print function, just like any other method call in a C-derived programming language, you call the name of the method and then you open up the parentheses and enter the parameters. And here we only have one parameter, which is a string, and it will print the string into the console area. Very simple, very easy. Till now you can think of this as system.out.println in Java. Nothing too complex. All right, so let's talk about the types of data that we have in Swift programming language. So in here, we have the basic data types that you will get in any C-derived programming language, like integer, and we have floats, doubles, boolean, which is in here luckily called bool, not boolean, and we have string, character, and finally we have a new one, which is called optional. I'm pretty sure all of these are self-explanatory if you've already worked in Java. Basically, an integer is a number, a correct number that doesn't have any fractions. A float is simply a number that contains a fraction. Of course, you can dive a little bit more into a more scientific explanation, but I will try to keep it simple. And at the end of a float, you don't have to enter f. Actually, it will give you an error. Doubles work the same way in a syntactic point of view as floats. We have booleans, which are true or false, and we have strings defined just like in Java, characters with a single quotation mark, and finally we have optionals. I will dedicate an entire video on how to work with optionals. That's why I'm not going to really explain about it right now. Just stay tuned for the next videos. Let's talk about constants and variables and variable declarations. In Swift, we have the concepts of constants, if I will know how to spell them, and variables. So I'm going to go ahead and explain variables first. So to declare a new variable in Swift, you only have to write var, the identifier of the variable, and then the type. That's a variable declaration. Now, as we can see here, we have to define it in caps at the beginning. This is how you define an integer and assign a value to it. So what's happening in here is pretty self-explanatory as well. Swift is a very, very simple language. We have var keyword, the identifier, a colon, the data type equals 32. We don't have to enter what's it called, semicolon, and we don't even have to enter the type. It's type inferred. You can immediately just assign it any value that you want, and Swift and the compiler is smart enough to actually infer that it's an integer, as you can see from the right-hand side of the screen in the quick help section. So let's go ahead and move on. To define a constant, it's basically the same thing as a variable, but it's not var, it's let. And of course, constants are properties that you are variables that you simply cannot change after the initial assignment. So I cannot do this, but I can write x, which is a variable, and I can change its value. All right. All right, so let's move on. I hate errors, so I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out. The next concept I would like to talk about is called tuples. Now, if you come from a Python background, or if you have worked with JavaScript before, the concept of tuples should be familiar. So to give you a quick example on how tuples work, if I go ahead and define a class, I'm going to use C++ syntax in here. This is not Swift. I'm just trying to explain a quick concept. And I would like to create a coordinates class so that I will have an x value and a y value inside it. So basically, I would like a representation of a coordinate in here. I would like my coordinate to have x, y, and z variables. And you see what we just did? Just to create this simple, very simple data type, we had to create a new class and inside it declare 3 integers. Now there is a simpler way to do this, and this is the concept of tuples that's created in that's similar in Python and JavaScript. Now if I would like to write something like this, if I would like to write a property, a variable, and I would like it to have multiple properties inside of it, you can think of it as a container that you can pass around. All I have to do is enter something like this. That's it. So what I did here is create a constant, and this constant is called player coordinate. Its value its type is actually a tuple. That means that it's a concatenation of 3 integer objects. Each one of those objects, I can actually explain them. I can assign them values right here. So for example, if I would like to make a print statement and I want to print the first player coordinate, all I have to do is this. And it will work. Let me delete this. I'm just going to comment it out. I'm going to click Command R to run it. Right now I'm going to get hello world and the value, the first value, which is 2. The concept of tuples is very basic. It's basically a way to concatenate and group simple data types into a more complex data type, one that we can actually control, which is in this case player coordinate. So this is not a class, this is a tuple. So you can pass it around in function calls, you can do anything that you want with it. It's basically a way to group together groups of objects. So imagine that we have a scenario where we need to pass around a player coordinate, just like here. Instead of creating a class, all we have to do is just simply create a tuple immediately in one line of code, and then we can pass it around anywhere that we want. To access the elements inside, all we have to do is use 0, 1, or 2 to access the first element, the second, or the third. Remember, Swift is a zero-index programming language. That means that numbering starts from 0, not from 1. And that's it for the first lesson. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next classes. Cheers.